Let's begin with a blessing, blessing over Torah learning, which ends la'asok b'divrei Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. I really mean that today. I really mean that. I feel so grateful. These parshiot that we're in. This is just some of the greatest writing of all time. I mean, this is just like, it's just absolutely epic. The Joseph cycle, which we began last week and which continues for weeks, is, I mean, it's like, it's captivated the imagination of cultural forms, from Thomas Mann's massive novel, which I've never been able to tackle, just based on the Joseph story, but like 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 pages, like multi-volume novel. And it's crazy, not even one of his, big, but he devoted all that time to Joseph and his brothers. Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat, I mean, it's just, and it continues today. These are such incredible stories, and the writing is like truly divine, truly divine. And there are cliffhangers, and there are parallel narratives, and then there are scene changes, and we're going and back to Egypt and back to Israel. But one device that is used to frame where the start of the narrative and up to this point, to bring us to this point. This week is Parsha Miketz, and the device which we can think of as taking us from the beginning and bringing us to now is dreams. Dreams as certainly a prominent theme in this narrative, but also a structural device, right? We start the stories with Joseph's two dreams. Joseph has, it's all like, as we talk about dreams, we're talking about Joseph, because Joseph is really the primary conduit for dreams. He's like, he's the proto-Freud. Like he's the interpreter of dreams. He doesn't just have them. There are people who have had them before. Jacob famously had a dream. But Joseph has two right out the gate, and that's the beginning of the Parsha. And then there are another two. Now these are no longer Joseph's, but he meets two men in the dungeon, the executioner's dungeon, and they each have a dream. So there's two more dreams. And then our Parsha this week begins with Pharaoh having two dreams. So two dreams, two dreams, two dreams. There's a structure here, and it's the structure that takes us through Joseph's development and is telling us something about Joseph. I mean, I think let's talk a little bit about dreams, and as we do, we're talking about Joseph. We're trying to understand in a deeper way who Joseph is, because he's defined by them. But also, in talking about Joseph, we're able to really deep dive into the kind of the Torah's conception of a dream. What is the power? I mean, just to name the first, Jacob's dream, is to wonder what exactly a dream is, because Jacob's dream, he's talking to God. So is a dream a form of prophecy? I mean, that's just that's not like oh wow, that's the obvious question. That's the first question to ask. And yet somehow in the Joseph story, actually, I think it sinks back from that a little bit. And these are really dreams, right? There are other people who have had forms of prophecy that seem dream-like. Avimelech, Abraham, Jacob and the angel wrestling, but these are dreams. You go to sleep, you wake up, and you're wondering, what do these dreams mean? And Joseph knows. Here, let's begin. Let's dive in a little bit here. I'm going to put the source sheet in the chat, and take a look just at the first line here on your source sheet. This is when Joseph is in the dungeon, And first of all, what a remarkable thing that he's like in prison and he goes up to these guys and says, hey, you look kind of down today. What's up? And they say, well, we had dreams and there's no one to interpret them. Okay, so that tells you that that's an idea. Dream interpretation is already a concept, a well-established concept. And Joseph says the craziest thing. Now, we know he's had 2 dreams, but that's all we know. But he says, right here, Vayomer Yosef Aleichem, Halo Elohim Pitronim. God has interpretations. Sapru Nali. Now, tell me your dreams. Right? I'm not even sure what that means, but it tells us something deep. 2 core units of Joseph's understanding of dream. God has interpretations, but you can tell me the dreams and I will, I don't know, presumably give you God's interpretations. So it's just so rich. I can't be like it's a thrill to read this, a thrill to learn this stuff. So I hope we feel some of that thrill today. Let's dive in. We're going to, now I've spoken so far structurally, the two dreams, but our focus for the time being is Parshanut, is the tradition of, the classical tradition of interpretation of the Torah, the commentaries. And in Parshanut, we tend to, the work tends to be less in the grand structural and more in the zooming in, the close reading. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to zoom in on one line, which as I read through our Parsha, I find just particularly potent. So we're just going to, I bolded it. So you'll see as we read through the next passage, which is, you know, all of this writing is good, but like what a scene this is, what a stage it sets. And this is when Joseph's brothers come down to Egypt for the first time. And Joseph, whom they sold into slavery, has risen to power miraculously in just the last chapter, in fallen into the dungeon and then risen to power. It's like, it couldn't be more epic, a tale. They come down and Joseph is sitting there overseeing the distribution of resources of the country. They're there to beg for food, and critically, they do not recognize Joseph. He looks different, and they don't recognize him, and that's what that's the important device here for all the drama which is to follow, which you'll get a taste of here in this next piece. So this is the line in bold is the one that I'll want us to be working with and analyzing today. Okay, so here we go. When Jacob saw that there were food rations to be had in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you keep looking at one another? Lama titra'u." Now I hear, he went on, that there are rations to be had in Egypt. Go down and procure rations for us there, that we may live and not die. V'nichyev lo namut. So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to get grain rations in Egypt. For Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin down with his brothers, since he feared that he might meet with disaster. And why does he fear that he might meet with disaster? You can say it out loud to yourself. Because Joseph met with disaster. Jacob is traumatized and primed to be thinking of these things. Thus the sons of Israel were among those who came to procure rations, for the famine extended to the land of Canaan. Huge famine in the area. And Joseph, and this is important too, and Joseph, in part because Joseph is, as a result of Joseph's interpretation of the last two dreams, Joseph has understood that the famine is coming. Joseph is prepared for the famine. So Joseph's interpretations we know to be actually predictive. That's part of it too, or part of the information that we'll be playing on here. But verse 6, now Joseph was the vizier of the land, Hashalit al Haaretz, the one who controlled the land. Because like the Pharaoh was the actual king, but he didn't do the work. Joseph did the work. And it was he who dispensed rations to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed low to him with their faces to the ground. Ishtachavu lo apayim arza. Vayar Yosef, and Joseph saw his brothers. When Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he acted like a stranger towards them. And he spoke harshly to them. He said, "Where do you come from?" And they said, "From the land of Canaan to procure food." For though Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. And here's the line. And Joseph remembered the dreams that he had dreamed about them. And Joseph said to them, "You are spies. You've come to see the land in its nakedness." What is going on there? What is Joseph remember? What's happening for Joseph in this moment? Okay, but let's finish off the passage. But they said to them, "No, Lord, truly, your servants have come to procure food. We are all of us sons of the same man. We're honest men. Your servants have never been spies." And he said to them, "No, you've come to see the land in its nakedness," whatever that means. I mean, we could play with that a little bit. And they replied, we, your servants, were 12 brothers, sons of a certain man in the land of Canaan, Jacob. The youngest, however, is now with our father, and one is no longer with us. That's Joseph. But Joseph said to them, "It is just as I've told you, you are spies. By this you shall be put to the test. Unless your younger brother comes here, by Pharaoh you shall not depart from this place. Let one of you go and bring your brother, while the rest of you remain confined, that your words may be put to the test whether there is truth in you. Else by Pharaoh you are nothing but spies." Okay, so and then the real drama, the rest of this parsha and some of the next will be this. But really, this parsha is this back and forth, trying to get these brothers to do things, sort of tormenting them, torturing them, keeping some in prison, all to get Benjamin down to what is going on? The basic way of thinking about this scene is to ask, what's going on with Joseph? What is Joseph thinking? What's Joseph up to? What does Joseph want to do? But I want to take us through that by asking again, just to think about this verse, and I'll put it up one more time, and then I'm going to open up the conversation. Thinking about this verse, "V'yizkor Yosef et chalamot asher chalam lahem, v'yomer lehem meraglim atem lirot et ervat haaretz batem." And Joseph remembered the dreams that he had dreamed about them, and Joseph said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the land in its nakedness." And I guess I should also quickly just read the actual dreams, just so we know what Joseph's remembering. Okay, I'm going to ask you to interpret, to speculate, but I don't want you to just wildly without having all the requisite material. And these are the dreams that Joseph ostensibly remembered. Once Joseph had a dream, which he told to his brothers. They were young back then, and they hated him even more. They hated him already because his father showed him favor, but they hated him even more after he said to them, "Hear this dream which I have dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field." When they paint that, I think of it as corn, because whenever they paint them, it looks like corn, but like wheat stalks. And suddenly my sheaf stood up and remained upright, and then your sheaves gathered around and bowed low to my sheaf. His brothers answered, "Do you mean to reign over us? Do you mean to rule over us?" And they hated him even more for his talk about his dreams. He dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers, saying, "Look, I've had another dream, and this time the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." Sorry. I mean, it's like, and they hated him. Like, you get it. Just like, I had this crazy dream where I was in charge of everything. I ruled the world, and you all worship me. Isn't that amazing? And if you've never seen, by the way, the Hayudim Bayim, the comedy sketch in Israel, Hayudim Bayim, if you've never seen their rendering of it, you do have to have some Hebrew to pick it up, although maybe someone's got to translate, but it's just amazing. Like Joseph as sort of like this like young queer teenager, like, I had a dream and I was magnificent and you all were like awful, just like surrounding, and I was like a dolphin in the middle. Like it's just great. It's like so worth seeing. But but the point is it's obnoxious. And I'll just finish the dream. I'm sorry, I've been doing a lot of talking. I'll turn it over to you soon. And he dreamed another dream, and he told it to his brother, said, okay, all this time, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me. And this is interesting. And when he told it to his father and his brothers, his father berated him. What he said to him is, this dream you have dreamed, are we to come, I and your mother and your brothers, and bow low to you to the ground? So his brothers were seething at him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Now that's interesting. Now you have the dreams, but it's interesting. Jacob also interprets dreams, doesn't he? Like, maybe this was obvious or maybe not, but those are the dreams that Joseph is remembering when he sees his brothers. What's going on for him? Why does he remember those dreams? Why is it important? What's happening here? And what's happening inside of Joseph that then leads him to hide who he is, send them on this mission, test them, try them in all these ways, okay? That was a long introduction, but it's quite a tale. So let's start our interpretations, and I open it up to the group. What do you think is happening for Joseph here? Lee or Julia?
Hi. It kind of sounds like he's remembering the dream, and he's like, oh, I have the chance to make this happen right now. Like if I really wanted to, like I could. It seems like a weird segue to go from he remembered the dreams and then automatically he said, you're spies, and then they kind of like their reaction would have to be they have to prove themselves and say, oh no, like we bless you and praise you and all these things, and we'll bow down to you to prove how much we want to like get this food and that we're not here for malicious reasons.
Okay, great. So you have offered us an interpretation that is very strong and in fact classic. And I want to know what your version of it is. And the interpretation is that Joseph sees the brothers there and realizes, oh my goodness, I can make these dreams come true. I can make these brothers bow down to me. Now, Julia, do you mean that, how do you think is Joseph realizing that for the first time? Like, whoa, oh my gosh, the dreams are happening. Like, do you think it blows his mind?
I mean, I don't know if he would have expected them to come down and for all these pieces to kind of fall into place. But it almost, like, I don't know if I want to make him out to be like just a villain and self-serving, but it's just like, oh, this is happening. Like I could really like do something for myself here. Because until the point where like he like later bursts into tears and reveals himself to his brothers, he's kind of like, this is my chance for like, it's payback.
Okay, great. So that's a great, you've given us a very vivid kind of sense of Joseph in that moment suddenly feeling like, oh my gosh, it's really happening. And if I work this out just right, I can fulfill the dreams, and I guess I'm supposed to. Okay, that's an important possibility. It's an important line of interpretation because it does allow us, as Julia said exactly, to see Joseph as not just some kind of psychotic monster, I was going to say, but truth is a traumatized man who's been abused by his family and is taking revenge. I mean, let's be fair here. He was sold into slavery. Wendy, what do you think?
Well, I love this stuff. I think if I want to take it a little bit further, we talking about dreams. I think Joseph has a great understanding of the power of dreams and what they represent on many different levels, which is what has brought him to this place in the first place. We think dreams are many things. They can be a pathway to our inner psyche, to our subconscious, and they are also thought to be a connection to the spiritual world. We can get messages from the other side oftentimes in our dreams. And Joseph really understands this very well. And I think Joseph also knows this is his opportunity to reconnect with the rest of his family. So he comes up with this plan. I think the dream has already come true. They're already bound down to him.
Mm-hmm.
The dream has already, yeah.
because you gotta get, in some ways at the end there, you gave us a very different possibility, because on the one hand, you said, and I want to ask you more about this, you said that the dreams can be a kind of a message from another dimension, certainly seen as such. But then you offered us, it's not incompatible, but in some ways a different way of thinking about Joseph's behavior, which is that it's not like he just sees, oh my gosh, I can get back together with my family. Now, are the dreams telling him, are the dreams reminding him of his family? Like that in some ways is a much more, you can imagine a much more kind of practical and like sort of psychological reading of the situation. Like I'm going to try and work this out because I see now I miss my family. But I want to ask actually more about the first interpretation you gave us, which is these sort of messages from the divine. Do you mean that dreams are prophecy? That is, they're messages about something true that will be, or do you mean more like dreams are? Is it looser than that? Like does a dream have to come true? Is that what a message from the divine actually is code for? Wendy, what do you think about that?
I think a little bit of both. I don't think it's clear, and it's not supposed to be clear. It's supposed to be nebulous. I think just as we live our lives, people say, if we look back on our lives at the end of our life, you can see it all worked out absolutely the way it was supposed to. But while we're in it, it is us creating what reality we will have for ourselves. Am I making sense with this?
Yeah.
So this is a part of who Joseph has been from day one. He's been which is why he's so bombastic and so full of himself, because he knows what's going to happen. He knows, and he knows here again, and he also knows that this is divine. This is divine. This is prophecy, but we also choose in our lives which part of the prophecy we will continue with.
Good. Okay, excellent. I think what Wendy has given us is something really, a really valuable perspective. And I'm glad I pushed a little further, because everything Wendy said is relevant. Both the high, lofty, spiritual, and also the just sort of thinking, personal, strategizing your way through the world. And actually, perhaps dreams represent a kind of a middle ground between prophecy, divine plan, and just human schemings. Dreams are like a suggestion from the great beyond of the way things could be, and they're not going to happen, but they could happen, and it is up perhaps to us to see if we can realize our dreams. And that is actually the way that we, even in English, idiomatically, the way we speak of dreams is like, oh, I have a dream, I hope to get there. So it's like I can see a world in which such a thing could be, and maybe God's even suggesting that to me, but it still takes me to make it happen. Right? Okay. And it reminds me. I want to just make sure I move to some of the other voices here.
Just one little thing that it reminded me of. Theodor Herzl, Im tirtzu ein zo agada. If you will it, it is no dream.
Great. David Kurtz.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the same track, except I'd be a little more emphatic. He's realizing at this moment that he's the number one player, and that it's not his will or anything like that. I mean, he said, surely God can interpret. He knows that he's not a bit player. He's the main actor in God's direction, because all the dreams have happened. And at this moment, it's like, oh, I'm really running the show. I'm really the guy that's running the show from above. I think it's a real strong case. I don't believe it, but it's a strong case for predetermination. He realizes, just what's going to happen here. And, I mean, I've always kind of felt like the genius of this story is that in Genesis, we've gotten to this point where he's destroyed all mankind, Noah, the flood, brought them all back. They're all kind of messed up. They're all kind of doing all this stuff. And I think that our God is the God of liberation. And he realizes that Joseph's story, he's been enslaved, now liberated. That's going to be the Jewish story. And this is why it sets up the whole story.
This what you've done, placing Yosef in this sort of, he's the channel. He's like the lightning rod for that divine energy. And as David describes it, he knows it, or he's at least starting to realize it. And this is one way of looking at Joseph's behavior now and throughout. And David said very very well that Joseph has already indicated that he and God are kind of like linked, and he's risen to power. I mean, like, wouldn't you think that you were the hand of the divine if you were getting messages for how to interpret dreams, and that rocketed you to ruling over the land where you were a prisoner? So part of, like, one way to see Joseph here is that Joseph is like, I am the one. I am God's agent in the world, right? And that doesn't have to be an awful thing, but it's a little bit of a scary one, isn't it? All right, let's see. Lots of hands up. Larry Gerber.
As David said, this is a confirmation of his status. The other dreams, they were first other people's dreams, and then the dream about the bowing down, that was in a sense denied by his brothers and fathers. And here it is, true. So now he's absolutely confirmed in what he is, who he is. And he calls his brothers spies because there's nothing that could put them more on the defensive than to make them the other. They're foreigners. All right.
Great. Okay. That was a very elegant picture you just drew for us. I love that. Larry lays out the 6 dreams that we started with, and really, like, imagines Joseph sort of checking through the boxes. I mean, maybe not like literally in his mind, but if you think about his life, he actually has been successful in predicting dreams, except for those 2 in his youth. He never got to, those didn't come true at all. In fact, it was the opposite. He went into slavery, he didn't rule over anything. And now he's seeing, oh my goodness, those are true as well. I really do have the power, right? So that's a good way of thinking about Joseph, thinking through his entire life. Okay, Esra.
Yeah, I'm drawn to interpret, I don't know why, but for some reason I'm drawn to want to interpret Joseph as maybe not as confident, that maybe he didn't know until that moment that his dreams might have some kind of power. But, as Wendy kind of pointed out, and others, it's between prophecy and desire, right? So what if perhaps he's feeling some kind of, I don't know why, but his own sense of guilt? Granted, he was young and he just shared this, whatever he thought when he was young, but here he is. I'm thinking about Joseph as a character. I mean, he's very charismatic, right? What happens with Potiphar's wife, and he's definitely finding himself in situations where he carries this power and presence that people react to. And so it's like, maybe, does any part of him realize that, yes, he gets to certain places, but what impact is he having on people? Why do people react to him in such a way? And so I can't help but wonder does any part of him think, oh, are my dreams more of a projection of what I want and a self-fulfilling prophecy? And, we later find there's so much pain in the isolation that resulted from where he ended up going. Yes, what his family did was not okay, but I don't know why I'm drawn to kind of want to look at it from this other angle of, maybe, yeah, I don't know.
Something a little humbler, something a little more complicated, like something a little more like,
does he feel guilty for what this image that he projected and shared openly?
Yeah. I mean, you're a psychologist, right? So you're like, that reading makes sense, right? Like, not Joseph as the kind of the avatar who sees, beams of light pointing into the future. But Joseph is like trying to work through, suddenly feeling like, oh my gosh, is something supposed to happen here? And how do I think, like Joseph is confused in this moment and remembering things and trying to process them in real time, right? And speaking of the real time, I want to remind us of a couple of things that I think are worth trying. Part of what we need to do as parshanim, as interpreters of the verses of the Torah, is to take account of the words in front of us. And I just want to remind us as we think about, okay, the dreams are of, let's just look here. The dreams are of all of the sheaves of Joseph's brothers bowing down to him. Now, let's just look here. Joseph's brothers came and bowed low to him with their faces to the ground. So that already happened. Okay, so his brothers came and bowed low to him. And then later it says, and Joseph remembered the dreams that he had had. I guess because of this, although it's interestingly, it's separated by a couple of verses, but okay. Like he asked them where they come from, but they had already bowed down. Okay, but then he remembers the dream, and then he launches into this thing, you're spies, and then they tell him about their family, and then he says, you have to bring your youngest brother, and that ends up being the great obsession of Joseph for the rest of this narrative. Get me Benjamin, get me Benjamin. And we could imagine a lot of explanations for that. Benjamin is his only full brother, after all. So maybe he wants that one. That's a separate class of what is his relationship to Benjamin. But in the context of our discussion, what's going on? Like, what are the pieces that Joseph is putting together? If we imagine him fulfilling a dream, has it been fulfilled? Is he going to fulfill it? Like, what's happening there? So we want to throw that question out also. Okay, I got a lot of hands up. I'm going to try to take all of these 5 hands, Matthew, Gary, Joni, Jen, and Lila. And then let's see if we can do all that. I may stop us in the middle if we get to a place where I want to show us, we haven't seen commentators yet, and we're going to. So Matt, please.
Okay, Freud says there's no negative in the subconscious. So maybe if Joseph never had the dream, when he had the dream, the seed of growing to leader status was, from that point forward, the seed of growing to leader status was there. Maybe if you never had the dream, you never
Matthew, do you mean like once he had that dream, we know, like as psychologists, we know that he has some kind of leadership streak in him?
No, I don't believe he knows anything.
Spiritually?
I don't believe he understands it until he's in that, he returns and he's in that situation where he says, now I see, it was a mystery. Like if you said, I never thought that I would be the type of person to wake up at 5:30 in the morning every morning. What that might mean is it was always kind of in the back of your mind somewhere. We're going to develop to that.
Right. It's what you're obsessing that you're not doing, or what you're saying that you're not doing is an indication that somewhere it's in your consciousness. Yeah. Gary.
We have 6 sets of 6 dreams, and there's a distinction between the first 2 and the second 4, and that the first 2 he tells it to his brother and there's no mention of God at all. In the second 4, each one he says, tell me your dreams, God will interpret them.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And what do you make of that? I mean, like, what I wonder when you say that is he, maybe the first 2 dreams were just dreams, but he's trying to make them prophecy. Or did he not realize that they were? I mean, how do you account for the?
Well, I think we can also ask if there's some transformation that has occurred in Jacob, from going, Joseph, in going from home to going to Egypt. Some transformation has occurred, which allows him to have a relationship with Hashem that he didn't have before that.
That's a really good question, and I think important point of consideration. Has Joseph now been transformed? Joseph's been through a lot, and the Joseph that we meet at the beginning of Parshat Vayeshev is so different so obnoxious, right? When we read those dreams, we don't like them. The brothers don't like them. You're not meant to like them. But by the end, when he's interpreting dreams, it's like he's helpful, he's powerful, he's wise. Chacham v'navon kamocha, right? There's nobody wiser or more perceptive than you are. So something happened to him in this evil tribe.
One interesting thing is that Rambam says when you take on a new name, you're no longer you've been transformed, you've been redeemed, and you're no longer the person you were before. And it's interesting, in Egypt, he takes on a new name.
A new name, which means the interpreter of hidden things, Safnat Paneach.
And that may be the transformation.
So you couldn't be making a better point, yeah.
And that may be the transformation needed.
I love what everyone says. I'm just hung up on him calling the brothers spies. And I think, Israel, you said, there was something that you said that I feel as though he looks at them and it's sort of like, are you on to me? Is there something about my external presence, but you see something that nobody else is seeing, and calling them spies? So I just wanted to ask you that. And also, I don't see the presents. Their father gave them honey. Remember their gifts that the father says, bring this to the man. And I'm sort of missing those gifts.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Right. But let's just take up your first reflection, because I think it's a sensitive and important one. That, I keep using words, is it more spiritual or more psychological? But what I mean by that is, do we look at this as some kind of divine force, or can we look at it as just simply a human being dealing with anxieties, fears, power, anger, just emotions, and trying to make sense of his world? And one way of thinking, like Joseph, I love the way you put, are you on to me? Like Joseph is sort of in retreat. He doesn't know what to do in the moment. Joseph recognizes his brothers, which means he's processing everything. His brothers don't recognize him, so they're just sort of like, can you give us some food? But he's suddenly reliving the last 2 decades of his life and trauma and everything. So who knows what's coming out of him and his dreams, and he remembers that. But what does that mean exactly? Does that just mean he's like rattling around like, oh my gosh, I remember the days when my brothers came to hate me and sold me into slavery, and now I can do whatever I want to them? I mean, that's certainly a strong reading of this narrative as well. Okay, I think I have Jen next, yeah? Or Lila, Jen or Lila, yeah. Jen, you go for it. Sorry, the boxes changed and I forget who I've called on first. Sorry,
no worries.
Go for it.
I'm so struck by the line, our brother is no longer with us. And I don't know if it comes across as euphemistically in Hebrew, but that whole scene hinges on the irony of that line, right? Our brother is no longer with us, and actually he is. And the idea that Larry pointed out of, he may have spent however many years thinking God wasn't there in that dream after all, because it didn't happen, but actually God was there with him. Or his trauma was not with him. He'd gotten past it, and now his trauma has come back to him. Like, irony is such a big part of that scene. And I'm trying in my mind to connect it to dreams. And I think there's a connection there in what Larry was saying. But I just can't get past that as such a crucial or pivotal part of the scene.
Right. Wonderful, Jen, really wonderful. And I started to smile as soon as you pointed it out, because I use the translation that they have here on Safari, but I change it when I feel like it's not exactly right, or if it's like, male pronouns for God, I try to change those. But this one is pretty, I read through it, I was like, oh, I don't have to do much work. I didn't change the one phrase I changed, I think, in this whole passage was this word einenu, because it said originally here in the English, it said, and one is no more. And that I was like, that's not exactly what einenu means, because that sounds like he's definitely dead. And einenu is literally like, we don't have him. He's not around anymore. And so I changed it to no longer with us, which can mean dead, but also can just mean is not with us, which actually, as you say, he is, but it is, I think, the reason I love this comment is because you suggest, and I think it's true, that there's a kind of ambiguity here that allows for something to be on the face of it one action or one thing, but actually revealing some deeper thing. And that's precisely what is happening when Joseph's brothers are bowing down to him. They're not bowing down to Joseph, they're bowing down to the grand vizier of Egypt so they can get food. But from Joseph's perspective, it's like, you don't even know it's happening. It's happening. So I love that comment. Lila, please.
Okay, I know we're zooming in, but I just want to zoom out a little because, like, I think we're trying to make sense of, like, what kind of story is this? And you talked about the psychological and the sort of or spiritual versus the, or maybe the psychological versus the spiritual, however you want to.
Part of the way I put it, but I'm not sure it's a good.
But I think, like, your excitement at the beginning, and I was reading this a little bit and I felt that same, like, whoa, like this is such a rich narrative. And, you know, David said something like the genius of this story or something like that. And I think it lies in the fact that, like, it holds both and it does it so well. And it's sort of like, you know, the OG, like Game of Thrones or whatever. And I'm thinking of watching The Crown, and there's this distinction, like there's the woman and there's the crown, like the crown is its own. And I do feel like there are two tracks that work seamlessly and consistently here. And so you have Joseph the man, and he's obnoxious, and then he's arrogant, and then he's scheming, he's vengeful here potentially, and there's this whole psychological drama. It's so much drama, and he creates this drama, you know. And then there's like the crown, and I think that he's living in that too, and he's been tapped, and dreams are prophecy, and he has to interpret them to move the narrative forward. And I just think it's all happening, and that's why we're so drawn to it.
I just could, that is just such a beautiful way of accounting for everything that we're looking at. I just awed by that description of kind of two almost parallel tracks for thinking about Joseph that are operative the whole way through, and maybe actually operative. Once you say that, I want to say through the whole Torah, where there is a kind of a human level, and then there's the symbolic divine, or as you put it, the man in the crown. There's like, what is this person represent? What is their role? What function do they serve? How are they, and we might add to that, kind of God's agent or the Torah's agent in the playing out of larger national, familial, maybe cosmic narratives? And then on the other hand, what's going on for this human being who bursts into tears all throughout the story, right? Who we know to have been an arrogant young man, who we know to have suffered greatly, but just to come out of 2 years of prison. I mean, like, these things are both going on, and maybe we're sitting here trying to figure out, well, is Joseph really tuning into something, or is he just having a moment? But actually, it's all at once. Okay. With that said, I want to make sure we do get to a little parshanut, and the parshanut that we're going to look at is a debate, a machloket, between two of the commentators. And often when we say debate in Jewish literature, the people weren't actually in debate. We just see two ideas that are the opposite ideas. We call it a debate. But in this case, we have a debate because Rashi gives an opinion, and the Ramban, Nachmanides, Moses Nachmanides, not Maimonides, but Nachmanides, is famous for engaging directly with Rashi and the Ibn Ezra, and is like, it takes a lot of moxie to say that Rashi is wrong. Just say it, but he does, and we're going to see an example of that. But actually, in some ways, it's interesting because their accounts are not so different. It's a nuance here that we're talking about, and I would remind us of Julia's comments earlier that saw Joseph kind of strategizing to make the dreams come true in order to fulfill them. And I think one of these positions, Rashi's or the Ramban's, is Julia's position, though they there are two versions of the same thing. I hope I'm not being too confusing, but I think I don't want to give it away yet, but I think Julia's anticipating one of these thinkers. I think she also had her own version of it, but just that all reminds us of where we were at back then in the conversation. Let's now go back to consider two takes on Joseph remembering the dreams here. And we're first going to look at Rashi, who says, as one of the reasons Rashi is so beloved is because he keeps it short. Okay, so he had dreams, and literally that he remembered the dreams that he had dreamed lahem, to them. So Rashi starts just by telling us that he means like dreams about them. He remembers those dreams, not, although it's funny because the language is he dreamed it to them, dreamed it at them, for them, right? But Rashi says, but in context it means about them. And he says he then knew that the dreams had been fulfilled, for they, his brothers, had bowed down to him. Okay? So what does Rashi think? Rashi thinks it worked. It worked. It happened. And because they had bowed down to him, as we said, 2 verses earlier, they all bowed down to him. We saw that before. So now this is one take on Joseph, right? So I'm just going to remind us, they already bowed down to him. So Joseph saw that, and he remembered the dreams, meaning he now understood that the dreams had been fulfilled. Okay, that's one version. And I want to now just give you the disagreement because I want us to think through what's different about the Nachmanides' take on this. Okay, Nachmanides comes in and says, he quotes Rashi entirely. He often does that. It's a sort of like a little bit of respect here. Oh wait, that I mean to be lower. Let's see if I can lower that. Maybe later. Sorry. Here we go. Okay, Ramban quotes Rashi. Rashi says it means about them, and he then knew they had been fulfilled, for they had bowed down to him. But in my opinion, it was just the opposite. Because the verse says that it was when Joseph saw his brothers bowing down to him that he remembered the dreams that he had dreamed about them and realized that they had not yet been properly fulfilled. Since he knew from his interpretations that first of all his brothers would bow down to him from his first dream, that all of his brothers would bow down to him. And since he did not see Benjamin with them, he came up with this scheme to manipulate them, tachbula shiyalil alehem, that would manipulate them into bringing Benjamin down and thus affect the realization of his first dream. And by the way, let's stop there. Okay, Rashi says he saw them bow down and says, the dreams have been fulfilled. The Ramban says, no, he saw them bow down and said, oh, but there's one missing. I had a dream where all my brothers were bowing down to me. I have to get that last brother so that I can make the dream come true. Now, first of all, which one of those positions is Julia's position? Julia, which one do you think is? Anyone else?
Well, when I heard you say it, I was like, oh, I like Nachmanides better. And now, okay, that is what
that's right. Nachmanides, like Julia, sees Joseph as not having fulfilled the dreams, but seeing that he can, and that explains a lot of what is going on from then on, is Joseph is now working on trying to make the dream come true, as if he has to, as if it's like his mission to fulfill the dream, for reasons, I don't know why, but here's another echo of Julia's comments earlier. I think you'll remember that Julia also said that that makes Joseph less of a villain and more of like, whatever, I don't know how we account, he's trying to do something he feels he has to do. And the Ramban, Nachmanides, they're just two names for the same figure, says the same thing. V'lulei kach haya Yosef, lulei kain haya Yosef chotech chet gadol litzaer et aviv. And if not for this intention, we would have to say that Joseph would have been committing a terrible sin, tormenting his own father like that. And that's right. I mean, how do we account? Joseph seems, I said earlier, almost psychotic, like maniacal. But one way of looking at this, and it's a very, okay, now I want to turn it over to you for the rest of our time together. But what we're considering here is like, what is the difference between these two positions? One in which Joseph sees, it's happened, and another one where Joseph is now seeing how it could happen and has to actually like control the rest of the story in order. The whole point is to make the dreams happen, right? Okay, so let me turn it back over to the crowd. Arlene's had her hand up for a while. Is it not related?
Yeah, well, I guess
I can come back to you if you want.
No. I think it's I think both of those, Rabban and Rashi, I think they both are equally true.
How do you mean?
What I mean by that is I think is it Rabban? The dream, he realizes the dream is it did happen, but the thing with his brother Benjamin is the idea of, I think it relates to, that's the part of the dream with Benjamin. I mean, having them bring Benjamin and everything for the dream to actually happen. The whole story, to see if his brothers change, is with Joseph telling him to bring Benjamin, and I'm going to put Benjamin in jail until I don't trust you, and see how they relate to that.
Okay, great. So actually you can take a kind of a middle position and say, Rashi's right. Joseph saw the dreams are coming true, but the Ramban is also right, which is that they're coming true, but I could make them more come true. I could actually make it happen so that let's go for broke here, right? And that's like, so that he's in this sort of, and again, how do we account for his mind state there? Who is that Joseph? That's what I'm asking. Who is the Joseph? Someone who is the great manipulator? And even if he is the great manipulator, is he doing it out of anxiety or out of divine sense of confidence, right? Or is Joseph as startled as the rest of us?
Yeah, can I say one more thing?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. What I just thought was so interesting was, no one's really mentioned this, but Joseph now has a new identity. He's an Egyptian. So, and he's supposed to be taking care of the Egyptians with all the food. So the idea is that, there's no mention of that, because here, does he still have his Jewish identity? I think this whole thing wakes up.
That's a really interesting question. And I think it's actually worth asking it in an even bigger way, which is to say, is what Joseph is doing Jewish? Like, is the fact that Joseph is essentially a fortune teller in a certain way, is that because he's outside of the fold? I mean, now again, we saw Jacob sort of interpret his dream, but what Joseph has become, where he's like, I will tell you the divine plan, that sounds like the kind of talk that Deuteronomy will be very uncomfortable with, like, we're not supposed to talk that way, right? So what exactly, how do we account for, is a part of what we've been asking this whole time is what is the spiritual significance of dreams? Are we to understand in our theology that they are messages from God, right? Okay, I have time for just a few more. I'll take Hal and Jenna and Marlene. No, that's probably all that.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, especially the Nachmanides interpretation. I mean, it's all a big ego trip. I mean, it's Trumpian almost. I'm going to make the dream come true. I'm going to build the wall. I mean, it's I don't know. Where the connection to anything divine, I think, gets eclipsed by by the continuing arrogance of this person. So.
That's a really interesting and I think very legitimate concern here, that Joseph may be, when we ask the question, is Joseph the hand of God. It is, Joseph may see himself as the hand of God, but not actually, but that may be more his personality than what we are to understand. I mean, because it is a little uncomfortable, and even you hear Nachmanides, you hear Julia getting a little uncomfortable with the idea that if you think, and it's good parshanut, that Joseph is, oh, that's why he's doing all this stuff. Like, it's a good way of answering Joseph's motivations, but the problem is it makes Joseph either kind of a super being that doesn't really make sense from the Torah, like suddenly he has magic powers, or it makes Joseph a kind of a maniac, a kind of a, I control you come bow down before. I mean, after all, what is the dream? The dream is that you will come and bow down to me. That doesn't sound kosher either, right? So, okay, Jenna?
So there are definitely plot holes in my theory, but I've had a theory for a while that I've taught from the beginning of Joseph's story that fits really nicely with this Ramban commentary, which is the possible idea that Joseph and his brothers are all the same person. And I talk about it like for the pit, like what happens when you throw yourself in a pit and how do you get yourself out of it. But I think it's really interesting to think about it here. I haven't really thought about it about at the end of the story until now, but I feel like it answers the question of, like, it adds to why he's trying to get Benjamin to come, and he's trying to reconcile his old self with his new self and trying to find this inner peace of all this turmoil he's gone through. And it's his own character development that we're seeing unfold through these people, and that by trying to bring Benjamin there, he is trying to get his dream fulfilled and like reach his full self.
Okay, that's really that's really interesting and a beautiful place to leave off our thinking, because what Jenna suggests here, that there's a kind of you might imagine the 12 brothers, let's include Dina as well, the 13 are kind of they're all the tribes of Israel, right? They're all one. It doesn't split off in the way that it does with Jacob and in the way that it did with Isaac. The idea is that, like, these are all going to be the children of Israel, and yet they hate each other and are vying for ascendancy and actually trying to harm one another. And whatever else Joseph does or is trying to do, Joseph ends up uniting the family, right? And forgiving and revealing. And the end of the book of Genesis is maybe the most glaring thing that is happening at the end of the book of Genesis, is that the war between brothers, which has been going on since Cain and Abel, is repaired on some level. And that's what sets the stage for the birth of a nation. And so Joseph's dreams, like, it worked. It worked. Now, in order for it to work, they had to bow down to him. Like, it's still uncomfortable. But someone earlier mentioned determinism, right? And I want to just end by saying, however, we've had such a rich consideration here of Joseph's perspective, what Joseph might be trying to do or going through. And all along, we're asking these questions like, who is Joseph? Who is this guy? What is he thinking? And I don't know the answer to that question, but I will just end by just reminding us that Joseph is the guy who tells his brothers after this all comes out, do not, I guess I just put this in twice. That was just a mistake. Do not be distressed or reproach yourselves because you sold me hither. It was to save life that God sent me ahead of you. It is now 2 years that there has been famine in the land, and there are still 5 years to come in which there shall be no yield from tilling. God has sent me ahead of you to ensure your survival on earth and to save your lives in an extraordinary deliverance. So it was not you who sent me here, but God, and he has made me a father to Pharaoh, lord of all his household, and ruler over the whole of Egypt. So that's what Joseph believes. And whatever happened to get him there, when he's finally done with all of this, he will say, God was in charge all along. Now, what he means by that, I don't know. But our analysis of him in relationship to his dreams has been one way of looking into that question. Who is Joseph, and what does he believe, and how does it fashion him into the figure that we find at the end of Genesis, who gives it all up to God, right? So lots to think about, lots to continue thinking about. We will, oh my gosh, no, we will not. We'll take a little break. We're going to take a little break. Next 2 weeks are heading into everybody's away time, and I'm going to be away next week, and Ikar is going to be off the week after. So we will. I feel some pain at not teaching Parsha in any given week, but we'll take a couple weeks off, and we'll rejoin the first week of January. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the Joseph cycle.